Howdy folks, welcome to module 17 of the CompTIA A+ course. Like usual, as you can see, this is based on the 1200 series of A+, but this can also be used for the 1100 series, as well as the 1300 series, should that be released by the time you watch this. Now guys, this module is called Supporting Other Operating Systems. Now please note folks, this module will be a wee bit shorter of a module compared to some of the other modules we've covered on this course so far. It all depends on what's being covered. Alright, let's just get right to the agenda of this module. There are only two main sections that we'll be covering in this specific module, folks. The first section is Identify Features of Linux, or Linux, depending on how you want to pronounce that. The second section is Identify Features of the Mac operating system. Now, like usual, folks, this is the part where you give the video a like. Well, only if you want to, but I would really appreciate it if you do. Remember to also subscribe if you'd like to know when, well, I release more content, more modules or practice questions on this channel. Alrighty, so on to that first section of this module, which was Identify Features of Linux. Right, the first thing we're going to talk about in this section, guys, is shells, terminals, and consoles. So starting with shells and terminals. Shell, for those of you that don't know this yet, is basically a command interpreter. Yep, the shell provides a command environment by which a user can operate the operating system and applications. Many shell programs are available to use within Linux, notably Bash. Bash is something you can actually go use on Windows too, mind you. You get ZSH and KSH. These shells, guys, they expose the same core command set, but are distinguished by support for features such as command history, tab completion, command spelling correction, yep, or syntax highlighting. How do you like them apples? Now, as for terminals, you get many kinds of terminals on many different platforms and operating systems. But on Linux, when it comes to terminals, it's basically a user interface for a shell. Many Linux distros are deployed with no desktop environment. The boot process launches a terminal user interface connected to the default shell command interpreter, and the terminal and the shell are connected to the default shell command interpreter. Yep. The terminal and shell are connected by a teletype device that handles text input and output in separate streams. Now, something else we need to talk about on this topic, folks, is desktop environments. Linux, hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, Linux distros designed for use as client PCs typically load a graphical desktop environment at startup. The graphical environment, guys, is driven by an open source version of the X window display system called Zorg, or just X for short. I think most of you folks will just probably go and call it X for short, because that's much easier to remember. Now, various desktop programs can be launched within this thing called X, or Zorg, whatever you want to go and call it. Examples of this, guys, include Genome, KDE, Cinnamon, and XFCE. Within a desktop environment, you can open a terminal emulator to use the default command shell or an alternative shell if needed. The terminal emulator runs within a window on the desktop. And then the last thing we need to talk about here, guys, on this list is console switching. When a graphical environment is installed, the X server occupies one of the several virtual TTY consoles. Typically, this would now obviously be TTY1. The Control plus Alt plus FX keys, so if you go and combine those keys, that can be used to switch between consoles. Each console, guys, can support a different login prompt and shell, believe it or not. Alrighty, let's move on to the next topic here, command interface. So in this topic, the first thing I'll mention, guys, is case sensitivity. Commands, parameters, and file and directory names are all case sensitive in Linux. Scary, right? So you're the kind of person that makes a lot of typos. You're gonna struggle. You folks see, sometimes commands are nearly identical, but they differ literally by just like a blank space or something, and that would result in two completely different results, as you can imagine. it's extremely important that you folks type commands exactly the way they're supposed to be typed. Now, to say these things are extremely case sensitive would probably be an understatement, because they really, really are case sensitive. So, once again, if you're the kind of guy that makes a lot of typos, you're probably going to get very frustrated by this. Now, guys, from a personal perspective, if I had to list the amount of times that stuff did not work for me due to one small little tiny typo, we would probably never finish. It can be really frustrating at times and requires you to have a lot of patience, in my opinion. Now, since Linux is not always going to be your friend, and since you're sometimes going to need some help, that brings us to getting help. A Linux command reports its function and syntax when executed with the help option, guys. Now, the help option, folks, is sometimes several pages long, unfortunately. So it's quite common to see people pipe the output to the more command. The more command will show results a page at a time, which might help make things a bit easier at times. Alternatively, folks, you can use the man to view the help pages for a particular command. This is also a pretty nifty trick or command that might prove useful when you find yourself in a bit of a pinch. Next, we have file editors. Most Linux files use a plain text format, folks, and can easily be edited directly. There are numerous text file editors you can go and use. The Nano text editor is a basic example, often preferred by those coming from a Windows environment, someone like myself, like most of us, Now, to open or create a file, just use Nano. Now, besides this, Nano I've mentioned, some administrators prefer to use Vi, or Vim, W-I-M. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. I hope I don't butcher these names. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic, guys. Navigation commands. And when it comes to this topic, the first thing I want to mention to you folks is everything available to Linux is represented as a file in a unified file system. For example, first fixed disk would normally be represented in the file system by /dev/STA. A second storage device, perhaps one attached to a USB port, that would normally be represented as /DEC/SDB. When Linux boots, a system kernel and virtual file system are loaded to a RAM drive. Yes, that's correct. The unified file system identifies the location of the persistent root partition from the appropriate storage device and loads the file system stored onto the disk. Unlike Windows, folks, Linux does not use drive letters like C or D. Unified file system starts at the root, which is represented by a /. Completely different. So your whole world's going to be upside down if you're used to Windows. Now, directories and subdirectories can be created from root to store files. Linux's file system hierarchy standard specifies how the directories under root should be named and where types of files should be placed. For example, the home directory contains subdirectories for each user to store personal data, and the /etc directory contains configuration files. Well, I just call it etc, but it's actually ECT, I think. Anyway, the core commands that you should know to navigate the Linux file system are commands like the pwd command. In short, one could say this command will list the current directory, but to add on to that, for those of you who know a bit of Linux, the pwd command prints the working directory. Now, if that sounds confusing, printing will typically mean it displays on the terminal. That's basically what it means. We also have the cd command, which in short would be to change directory. cd is used to change the working directory. And that's something I actually use on Windows as well. So if you go try it out on Windows, it actually does work too, mind you. Then we also have the is command, which basically lists directory content. This is command lists the content of a directory in a similar way to the dir at the Windows command. So if you go to Windows into command prompt and you go type dir, which is short for directory, this is command does pretty much the same concept. It's just, on Linux. So on the Windows side of the coin, you're going to go and use dir, which is basically short for directory. On the Linux side of the coin, you're going to use the is command. But they essentially do more or less the same thing. Lastly, folks, we have the cat command. I just call it cat for short, which is used to output file contents. cat returns the contents of the files listed as arguments. So that about covers it for navigation commands. Now let's take a look at search commands. The first one is the find command, which does pretty much what the name suggests, folks. It's a file search tool of sorts. Not much to say about this command besides saying that it's used to, well, search for files. We also have the grep command. I'm probably butchering that name, so I'm just going to say grep command. This one I find interesting because unlike the previous tool I just mentioned to you guys, which basically just searches for files, this grep command is used to search the contents of files, and it doesn't stop there. It can also filter the contents. Pretty nifty, right? Now here we have file management commands, folks. As you'd probably expect, file management commands are used to, well, move, copy, and delete data. If we look at the cp command as an example, cp is used to create a copy of files either in the same or different directory with the same or different name. This is basically the same as the copy command you folks would find in the Windows operating system in a nutshell. Looking at the mv command, this command is used to either move files from one directory to another or rename a file. Once again, this is similar to Windows if we compare this to the cut command in Windows. On Windows, the copy and cut commands normally keep the name the same, but with Linux, this is not always the case, guys. We also have the rm command. This command can be used to delete files. It can also be used with the -r option to delete directories, mind you. Lastly, folks, we have the df and the du commands. These commands check free space and report usage by the device, directory, or file specified as the argument. The df command enables you to view the device's free space, file system, total size, space used, percentage value of the space used, and the mount point. The du command displays how a device is used, including the size of directory trees and the files within. Well, folks, believe it or not, that is the end of the first section in this module. Very short and quick, I know. The good news is very little of the stuff in this specific module is actually in the exam. Heck, most of you folks won't get any question about this stuff in this module. Some modules will have a lot of stuff that gets asked in the exam, and some modules will have only a few things, and then you have modules like this one where hardly anything is asked about this in the exam. I suppose you folks can look at this module as just for informative purposes, maybe. Now, guys, that doesn't mean this module is not useful. This module can still prove useful for when you guys go out in the field, and when you start working, then it's good to know this stuff. So, some topics are more important for the exam, some are important for work, some are important for both, and then you get some topics that are just not important at all. This one is more important for the working environment, not so much for the exam. Now, from the next module, of course, being module 18, there we'll start covering a lot of stuff again, which is going to be an exam. So I'd say module 18, the next module, is extremely important for anyone who wishes to write the CompTIA A+ exams. Anyway, let me not hold you guys up. Let's move on to the second and the last main section of this module, which is identify features of the Mac operating system. Now, first up in this section of the course, we have interface features. Let's start with menu bar and dock. If you're using an Apple Mac computer for the first time, folks, you will notice that the desktop and user interface is like a Windows-based computer in some respects, but different than others. Just like Windows, a Mac boots to a graphical desktop environment. Any apps you have installed and configured to launch at boot will also start, so it's very much the same as Windows in that aspect. At the top of the screen is the menu bar. So you'll find there's actually a menu at the top of the screen, something we don't normally see on Windows. This is always present with all apps, but the menu title changes to show commands for the active window that you're actually on. So if you keep an eye on it, you'll see, depending on what window you're on, the title of that menu bar is going to change. To the left of the menu bar is the Apple menu. This can be used to report support information and to, well, log out or shut down the computer. Now, as for dock, guys, in case you guys don't know what that is, the dock at the bottom of the screen gives you one-click access to apps and files. similar to the taskbar that you guys would normally see in Windows. Apps that are open in the dock, they display a dot below the icon. In short, folks, the dock is very much the same as the taskbar that you guys would normally see in the bottom of the Windows operating system. It does, however, have a couple of small differences, like I just mentioned. Now, regarding features, you also get something called Spotlight, folks. It's basically a search feature in a nutshell. The Spotlight search can be used to find almost anything on the Mac operating system, which is, well, very much the same as the search function you would normally find on the Windows operating system. On Windows 10 and Windows 11, this would basically be the Cortana search engine if we have to go and compare this to something in Windows. We also have Terminal. You'd remember, this is actually something we briefly spoke about earlier in this module in the Linux side of things. The terminal can be used to access a command line environment which uses either the Z shell, in other words ZSH for short, or Bash. Older Mac operating system versions use Bash, while if you look at the ZSH, this is the default from Catalina and up. Lastly, folks, we also have something called Mission Control and multiple desktops. The Mission Control feature is used for Windows management and enables the user to set up multiple desktops with different sets of apps, backgrounds, and so on. I don't know about you guys, but this is certainly something useful on my books. It's a geek's dream, basically. Okay, moving on to system preferences of Mac operating system. Let's start with the Apple keyboards. Where PC and Linux keyboards use Control, Alt, and, well, Alt-GR and Start modifier keys, the Mac keyboards have an Apple Power key, Command, Option, and Control keys. How about that? Now, guys, Command is closer to the Control key in terms of functionality. And Option is usually mapped to, well, Alt. You're going to use the keyboard pane in the system preferences, folks, to map keys if you're using a non-Apple keyboard to operate a Mac machine. Then we have the Apple Magic Mouse and trackpad and gesture support. Macs, guys, do not support touchscreen interfaces, but they do, however, support gesture-enabled Magic Mouse and Magic Trackpad peripherals. If you'd like to see what gestures are available on Mac, or if you want to change any settings, just open the trackpad pref pane, folks, and, well, that's it. Now, moving on to displays. The displays pref pane allows you to scale the desktop, guys. It allows you to set brightness level, it allows you to calibrate to a given color profile, and configure night shift settings to make the display adapt to ambient light conditions. So your phone actually does the same thing these days. Lastly on this list, folks, we have accessibility. The accessibility pref pane is used to configure assistive vision and sound options such as voice over narration of screen elements, cursor size, motion settings, zoom tools, display contrast, and font sizes and captioning. Alrighty, moving on to our next topic, guys. Security and user management. First up, we have Apple ID, something that's really been annoying for me over the years, but nonetheless, it is security. Each local account on the device can be associated with an Apple ID. This Apple ID, folks, is used for purchases from the App Store. It is used for accessing iCloud and other functions. There is a very good chance that a user may already have an Apple ID from a previous iTunes purchase, or even an iOS device that they might not have anymore. You can sign in and out of your Apple ID using the button on the System Preferences homepage. You guys just need to go and check there. Next, folks, we have privacy. Just like with Windows machines, Mac operating system has options to configure what analytics or telemetry data and personalized information can be collected, plus permissions for apps to use features such as location service or camera, or data stores such as contacts and calendar and those kinds of things. So it's very similar to Windows in that sense of what options you've got available. Obviously, you'll have to go and find them in a different place, but in terms of what's available, very much the same. You folks can adjust these options via the security and privacy pref pane, which looks something like the picture here on the right. Now, moving on to internet accounts and keychain. Now guys, the internet accounts pref pane, for those of you that don't know, can be used to associate other email and cloud accounts with your login. Yeah, how about that? Bet you didn't know that. The keychain helps you manage passwords for these accounts, other websites, and Wi-Fi networks. This feature is also available as iCloud keychain, which makes the same password securely available across all Mac operating systems and iOS devices, so that can be pretty handy. The keychain makes password management much easier, but occasionally problems can happen, I've seen. Lastly, folks, we have something called File Vault. Now, guys, this is something they might potentially ask you in A+ exam. I know I did say earlier, in this module is hardly anything they'll ask you about this in the exam. But this is one of the few things they might potentially ask in the exam. It is something I have seen them ask in exam, so make sure you remember this one. File Vault, guys, is a disk encryption product. As most of you already know, encryption is a great way to protect against anyone who happens to get their greasy hands on our device. The data is encrypted and they can't do anything with it in those situations. Only the owner can access the encrypted data. Now guys, File Vault is basically the equivalent of BitLocker on Windows. So on the Windows operating system, there's many kinds of encryption we get, but if you go look at a Windows operating system, you get something called BitLocker, which allows you to go and encrypt the whole freaking hard drive. On the Mac operating system, you get this function called File Vault. It's basically the equivalent of BitLocker, except File Vault is on the Mac side of things, and BitLocker is on the Windows side of things. But they very much do the same thing. So please remember this one for the exam, guys. Now moving on to our next topic of the Mac operating system, Finder and iCloud. As with Windows, a Mac, guys, can store files on local drives, but cloud storage can represent a more secure option and make it easier to synchronize data between devices. Now, the Finder, folks, is the Mac equivalent of File Explorer on Windows. That's basically what it is. So if you go look at the File Explorer on Windows, that allows you to, well, basically browse the operating system. Finder is basically the same equivalent, it's just on the Mac side. It lets the user navigate all the files and folders on the Mac. It's always present and it's always open in the dock. Now as for iCloud, on the other hand, iCloud is Apple's online storage solution for its users. It provided a central shared location for mail, contacts, calendar, photos, notes, reminders, and so on across the Mac operating system and iOS devices. By default, each user is provided with 5 gigs of storage. It's not a lot, but it also is depending on what you kind of do. So by default, each user is provided with 5 gigs of storage. At least that's what it was the last time I checked. So I stand to be corrected, but the last time I checked, by default, it was 5 gigs. This might have changed though, since, well, these things do tend to change over time. Alrighty, moving on, guys. So firstly, folks, there are 2 main distribution mechanisms for the Mac operating system apps. These are the App Store and, well, app downloads. So starting with the App Store, or should I say installation from the App Store. The App Store provides a central portal, guys, for Apple and developers to distribute free and, well, paid for software. It is also used to distribute updates to Mac operating system and new releases of the operating system. Access to the Apple Store is mediated by an Apple ID though, like I've mentioned multiple times before. As soon as we start talking about the Apple App Store, folks, you ain't going to get nothing done unless you've got your device hooked up to an Apple ID. It's as simple as that. No ifs or buts about it. Now luckily for you guys, the Apple Store is not the only way to get yourself an app. You can also look at just, well, downloading apps, which Apple calls the installation or download apps. The apps you can download are pretty much the usual apps that folks would expect. These would be apps like, well, Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Cloud, Skype, or well, these days we call it Teams, that kind of stuff. You get the idea. Now guys, there is something I want you guys to pay close attention to here though. Usually, when you go to a vendor website to download an app of your choice, most apps tend to download a Windows version and not an Apple version. When you go to a vendor's website, make absolutely sure you download the Apple version. That's assuming it's available. Unfortunately, not all developers make an Apple version. But assuming it's available, make sure you click on the right one. Otherwise, well, yeah, you're going to download the Windows version and you can pretty much figure out what's going to happen. It's just not going to work. Now, speaking of downloading the correct version, there are also two main Mac operating system package installer formats you need to know about. The first is DMG. This format is used for simple installs where the package contents just need to be copied to the application folder. The second is PKG format, which is used where app setup needs to perform additional actions, such as running a service or while writing files to multiple folders. Now, if you folks find yourself in a situation where you need to uninstall an app on your device or the device of one of your users, the good news is for any app, the uninstallation process is simply to use the Finder to delete the .app directory or, well, drag it to trash. As simple as that, guys. Also, since we are talking about apps here, guys, we have the topic of antivirus. Just like any other operating system and platform, Mac operating system also has its fair share of vulnerabilities which can be taken advantage of. As you can imagine, I would definitely take advantage of one of these if I know about it. With all the operating systems, it's always important to have an antivirus. It's also very important to keep that antivirus up to date. It doesn't help you much to have one and, well, to never update it. You need to keep that sucker up to date, guys. Otherwise, it's not going to help. And when it comes to computer security on an Apple device, guys, the basic security rules apply. Download preferably only from trusted sources and download only trusted content. As soon as you start going to, well, sketchy websites and you start downloading sketchy stuff, well, then you're on your own. Let me put it that way. You're going to be on your own. It's not going to end well. Sooner or later, something bad's going to happen. Alright, and then lastly on this list, folks, I have to mention corporate restrictions. Mac operating system, along with many other installations, can be enrolled into something like an MDM. For those of you that don't remember what an MDM is, that is something I've covered in this course before. But if you don't remember what that is, it is short for mobile device management. You get many MDMs out there, but one of the main ones that most companies use is something called Microsoft Intune. It basically allows us as administrators to manage people's devices, to kind of sort of control them. I can go and control what they can install, what they can't go and install. I can go and deploy stuff to them, updates, drivers, patches. I can check what they've got installed. I can go and check what version of an operating system they've got or edition. I can check what updates they've got installed, what drivers they've got installed, and I can also go and install or uninstall all of the above mentioned. I can even go and do remote wipe, guys. So, yes, just because you're using a Mac device, don't think for a moment that I can't go and use something like a Microsoft tool, like an Intune platform, to go and manage your device. Intune can manage any operating system. It can manage Linux, it can go and manage Mac, Windows, Android, iOS. It can work with all of them. Anyway, guys, moving on to our last topics. Operating system and app updates. So, in the Mac operating system, the App Store checks daily for new updates, patches, releases of installed apps, and all of that kind of stuff. If a newer version is available, a notification will be shown against the App Store icon in the dock for you guys. Then you know there's a newer version of something available. You'll also have a choice then to either update the apps individually or update them all from the button at the top. It is recommended, though, to choose Update All so that the latest versions of your apps and updates to the Mac operating system are on the Mac. It is also possible to automatically update apps to the latest version, folks. To do that, you just go to the App Store and then Preferences. There you just configure the appropriate settings and ta-da! You're done. Now, guys, most apps that you download and install from third-party developers they'll generally go and automatically check if there's available updates. And if there are, they're just going to go and run them. So it's actually weird these days if apps don't go and update themselves. Usually, a prompt will be displayed to update, and then you can just go click on, well, either update or cancel. Like expected, it's also possible to, of course, check manually for updates using the Check for Updates menu option in the app itself. Alright, folks, let's move on to the topic of device and network settings of Mac. Starting with the networking side of things, you can manage network settings either from the status menu on the right hand side of the menu bar or via the system preferences. Just like a Windows machine, you can also join the Mac devices to a Wi-Fi network, and the same goes for a wired network. If you want to configure settings like IP addresses, use the advanced button to configure the IP properties and the proxy settings if you need to go and do that. When it comes to printers and scanners, not much I can say here, folks, besides for you to, well, use the printers and the scanner pref pane to add the manage print and scan devices. It's really that simple. When it comes to disk utility, the disk utility app, folks, can be used to verify or repair a disk or file system. So it's very much like the check disk function that you would get on Windows. It can also be used to erase a disk with security options in case you're selling or passing on a Mac. Generally, folks, there is no need to regularly go and defragment a Mac hard drive. It is possible to run a defragmentation, but it's very rarely needed, guys. Lastly, folks, optical drives and remote disk. Believe it or not, since 2016, no Apple Mac has been sold with an internal optical drive. So that's almost a decade, right? While an external USB drive can be used, another option is the remote disk app, which, well, lets the user access a CD or a DVD drive on another Mac or Windows computer. Pretty cool, right? It's almost like borrowing hardware. It's weird, but yeah. I don't think you can even find an optical drive on a Windows machine these days. I mean, a lot of Windows machines don't even come out of optical drives. It's just, it's legacy. When is the last time you've seen someone use a DVD or a CD? Let me know in the comment section down below, guys, if you know of somebody that's used a CD or a DVD recently. Well, folks, guess what? We're now moving on to the last topic of this module. It really has been a short module, and I know it sounds mean, but I'm glad this is a short one, folks. The previous modules of these courses, they really did a number on me, so it's nice for a change to have a bit of a short module. Unfortunately, the modules that are going to come after this one are going to be quite long again, so it really depends on what's in that module. Some modules, they're a lot quicker and a lot easier to cover, while other ones are a lot more lengthy because there's a lot more important content in them. This one, there's hardly anything in this module that's going to be in the exam. Anyway, so the last topic here, folks, is time machine backup. There is a picture on the right of what it is more or less, or what it more or less looks like. The time machine, guys, this is kind of like the file vault we spoke of earlier. This is actually a topic that I've seen in the exam as well. So, yes, there's very few things in this module that's in the exam, but the file vault is something they'll ask you about in the exam, and the time machine is also something they'll ask you about in the exam. So make sure you remember both of these, what they do and all of that. Now the time machine, folks, very similar to the system restore function you would find on Windows. So earlier we spoke about file vault, which is used for encryption. I compared that to BitLocker on Windows. It's very much the same. Time machine on the Mac side is very much the same as system restore on the Windows side. So if you're familiar with system restore, time machine is kind of sort of the equivalent of that, just on the Mac side of things, guys. So the time machine pref pane enables data to be backed up to an external drive or partition. So it's not exactly the same, but it's similar. By default, folks, the time machine actually keeps hourly backups for the past 24 hours, daily backups for a month, and weekly backups for all previous months. When the drive used to store backups becomes full, the time machine starts removing older backups to free up some space. So it just kind of overwrites them. It really basically just goes and overrides the oldest backups. So it's pretty much what it does. If you've got a dash cam, they do the same thing. Well, folks, we've reached the end of this short module. The next one will be much longer and we'll have a lot more content, which is obviously a lot more important for the exam. I hope you folks have enjoyed this short module for a change. Enjoy it while it lasts, because the next one is not going to be that short. If you have enjoyed this module, guys, please remember to give it a like. I really do appreciate it when you guys do that. If you'd like to know when the next module goes live, maybe consider subscribing, guys. And in case you guys don't know, at the end of this playlist, you can find practice questions for both Core 1 and Core 2 there. They're not the actual questions from the exam, but they do cover the same objectives, and they will test and measure you on the same skills. And of course, if you're looking for more practical-based questions, that you can find on my Patreon. The link is in my video description down below, so just go and check that out, guys. And then, guys, a quick shout-out and thank you to the supporters of this channel, guys. Thank you very much. If you'd like to support the channel, you can find that information in the description down below. So thank you very much for those of you buying me a coffee or a milkshake. You can do that in the description down below. For those of you clicking on the thanks button below the video if it's available in your country. Those of you doing donations, and of course the Patreons. So for those of you that have opted to have your name displayed, here they are. Unfortunately, most people prefer to stay anonymous, but if you do become a paid Patreon, I would normally reach out to you and I would ask you if you want to have a name of your choice displayed. And if you say yes, the name you choose will be displayed here. So if you would like to have that, become a Patreon. Go check it out, guys. And in case you guys don't know, the channel does have a Discord server, IT community of like-minded people. I'm in there. Other IT trainers are in there. Lots of people studying for A+ and other courses are in there. So if you want to ask questions or help people with their questions, that's the place to be. Right, folks, I will see you on the next module of the CompTIA A+ course.